Can we thank him for meeting us today?
Yes.
And give him gratitude for being willing to show up?
Yes.
Thank you. Before we start exploring, we would like to ask him a question, if that's okay.
He's ready.
We wanted to know if he would be able to provide or give us a way for us to know that we are communicating with the Pleiadians. How do we know this is coming from them and that this is the truth? Is there anything that he can share with us so that we can know that we are actually communicating with the Pleiadians?
He says yes. He says that's why we began here in the architect room. He's retrieving one of they're in the rolled up tube things. It's the way we're being shown them. He wants to unfold one and explain, so I'm telling him that he can do that.
We're here.
So he's taking it to the table in the center, and I'm standing next to him. And we're unrolling this architectural, it's kind of like a schematic. I'll let him explain.
Please go ahead and explain how this helps us know that we are actually communicating with the Pleiadians.
What he's showing is the geometries of energetic resonance and communication that come through the human form. It's not specific to communicating with the Pleiadians, but rather to communication in pure communication.
Can you elaborate on that and help us understand fully?
Yes. So as you are already familiar, there's the frequencies of duality, polarity, and there's the frequencies of neutrality.
Yes.
You know this well. Non-polarized or neutral communication is the key you've already discovered.
Yes.
But here's schematic. The reason I chose it is to use this as a visual representation, and we'll walk through it. For references that you already have is the image drawn of the circle and the square and the man.
The Da Vinci Man?
Yes. The ratios in that, those provide a code for a ever-increasing, ever-closing in on perfect neutrality. You know it in your mathematics as phi ratio. When you are communicating in a place of neutrality, communication is inherently a polarized form because it is sequenced over time. It is variable in frequency. The very act of communicating with voice is to create a polarity. Otherwise, there is silence. So in truth, there is no such thing as actual neutral communication. For the very idea of an image is a polarization. The very idea of a sound is to move in one direction and another. And so this is an excellent representation contemplating the geometry of what you know as phi ratio. It is to anchor the polarization of the frequency to a central point that the more the frequency moves, the closer and closer it gets to the actual neutrality without ever actually arriving in neutrality. Another way to simply look at this is dividing a number by another number. You can divide into an infinitesimally small number and yet still never reach zero. There will always be a frequency, and yet it is to oscillate around the zero. This is why you refer to it as the 0 point.
Yes.
When communication is very amplified in the frequency's amplitude, in other words, it oscillates with a high polarity of up and down, large portions of that communication become disconnected from that central 0 point anchor. And this is where you experience the extreme polarities in communication, opinion, and perspective that seem to obscure and even at points negate the existence of a neutral. When polarity is stabilized, which is the purpose of the techniques that you've used to connect here in this moment, such as the stabilization of the vertebrae of the spine, the anchoring to the flow of energy directly up the spine. The reason that technique works to create neutral communication is the spine is in the body what the central axis of a phi ratio spiral is to geometries.
Yes.
If we were to take the circle and the square that is drawn around the Da Vinci Man, turn it horizontal so that the man stands vertically inside the circle and the square, and we were to make the circle and the square vary in size, in other words, to be a frequency, we were to rotate it so that it were to spin while varying in size to an infinitesimally small size in the center to an infinitesimally big size expanded outwards. And we were to create this rotating, pulsing, expanding, and contracting motion in and out of the center of the spine of the Da Vinci Man, for example, while also sliding the circle and the square upward in an oscillating fashion. We would get a repeating phi ratio pattern running in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
When we take the time to stabilize the mind and body into a still space and walk through the body in the vertebrae of the body, it is the same as the somnambulism technique you use now, or the other techniques that bring about a neutral, still space. Now, you asked about ways to know that the communication is stable. For example, there is one happening right now in body, and if you look closely, you may notice that his eyes are just gently leaking water. It's like tears, but not for the sake of tears, but simply for the sake that the eye ducts are deeply relaxed, and therefore there is flow. You can also notice other things which you're quite familiar with in your work with QSE and the hypnosis and all of such methods that you are very studied in,
Yes.
in just monitoring and observing the human body and the speech, etc., to know if somebody is in a polarized space of communication or a neutral space of communication.
Yes.
To elaborate on this just a little bit further with some information that I think may bring possibly some additional clarity, or in truth rather a reminder of what you already know, but to maybe expand that perspective. There is in truth both truth in neutral communication and in polarized communication, and neither is better than the other. One is inherently a bit more stable. The neutral communication remains after a polarized communication has come and gone, and this is why it is considered to be an optimal state and an optimal thread of information, because it is the closest to the never-ending stream of consciousness. And yet, if actually entering the never-ending stream of consciousness, there would not be the experience of communication, as the idea as you perceive and experience communication is only relevant to a mind that is existing in a polarized aspect of reality, or what you would call reality, existence perhaps.
Yes.
So to bring this, as you say, full circle, there is no real need to differentiate in many times between polarized communication and non-polarized communication. From the human perspective, it is often helpful to seek the idea of an ultimate truth, and yet you know that an ultimate truth does not exist, for it hinges only on perception. Perception and communication being nearly synonymous, both ways of receiving information, and both requiring the existence of at least a slight amount of polarity for there to be any image, thought, or idea, etc., to be perceived or communicated or received. The geometry of the phi ratio can be used as a map to find that central thread. And as you're well aware, this is encoded into many, many things, including the very structure of DNA, the foundation of the body, the geometry of the physical form of the body, the dimensions of the body, also the dimensions of the planet, the dimensions of the pyramids, the ratio of the shape, size, construction of things like the pyramids to the size of the planet, and varying other points that serve as markers of the mathematics to return towards the neutral thread of conscious existence. And this subject also relates to the subject of what you sometimes in the human form perceive as destiny or purpose. It is not that there is a predetermined destiny or purpose. It is that for each being, each perceiver, each communicator and receiver of communication, there is a phi ratio that is unique to that individual. In other words, there is, you might consider it a thread that you move along through your experiences. And when you find yourselves in great polarization, you are simply looking at that thread from a distance, and you see it in polarization, and you have the experience you have from that place. As you know, it's helpful to shift awareness and perspective closer to the neutral place. The neutral place does not negate the polarized place, but also includes and validates the incoming swing from the polarized and the frequency through the central. And if you look at this as a graph of a frequency, as you can see here, if we look at the graph of the frequency, it oscillates. So each time it swings past the center or around the center, it comes into what you would call alignment with the center, but it never actually touches the center.
Yes, understand. So
Okay.
any polarized experience, it's something that can never actually be experienced. Is that what you're saying?
The central neutral experience is not an experience.
Yes, it's nothingness and allness, right?
That is how you would look at it from a polarized experience.
I see.
Hence why you used two words to describe.
I understand.
We don't have a word for it, but the closest we can get to would be two words to describe one thing. But perhaps if you reverse the word one, it also could spell no with an E. It would be weird.
Weirdly enough, everything you had just explained, I completely grasp and understand.
We know that you do. It is not new information, simply a reminder of the truth of what you know, and yet the truth of what you cannot fully experience from within the human experience.
Yes.
You touch it, you skim by it, you pass close to it, and in passing close to that infinitely great, yet infinitely small, the everything and nothing, when you touch it, when you come close to it, when you synchronize with it, when you align with it, what allows for the shift, as you call it, to occur is if we were to visualize that thread as the central axis of a frequency graph, and if we were to visualize the frequency graph not as an up and down, but as a cycle that goes around and around, and if the frequency is small, if the amplitude is small, it stays very close to the center, skimming along that central thread, perhaps just ever so slightly touching the central thread, but also ever so slightly being separate from the central thread. That is the frequency that some are able to access through what you would call the gamma wave, whereas the other brainwave states and states of being are more like a larger amplitude frequency that is cycling around that central thread just farther away in a bit of greater separation. Now, when a being comes into that place of stillness or depth or allowance, as you might say, it comes into proximity. And proximity, closeness, these are words of measurement and therefore words of polarity, so they do not actually describe what happens. But if you were to imagine that you were riding on that graph of a frequency, and it is three-dimensional, and it is swinging around and around and around. Like, to paint a very nice 3D image of this, you know those carousels with the horses that you can get on and ride? You can ride on the one on the outside edge.
Yes.
You can ride on the one on the very center edge. And if you ride on the one on the outside edge and you reach towards the center, you cannot touch the center. If you ride on the one on the inside edge, and then you might be able to reach out and touch the central wheel of the carousel. In touching that central wheel of the carousel, imagine that upon coming close to touching it, it allows for you to access a stream of energy that pours out of it. In essence, it's kind of like poking a hole from the world of polarized reality into the everything and nothing.
Yes.
Although there is no hole poked, because it is everything and nothing. But if we visualize it for the purpose of this discussion as reaching out and touching it with your fingers, and as you touch it with your fingers, it is to open a tiny hole into that stream of all. An immense amount of energy can flow through that blip. And that energy has the power to both shift and destroy. And humanity has used the ability to open those blips for positive and negative things.
Yes.
You have used this in your sessions to facilitate and allow for those who choose to allow to touch the essence of all, to experience a shift that you would call healing.
Yes.
And there are those who have used the exact same ability to develop what you know as fusion and destructive abilities. And there are those who have used it to generate nuclear power and do so safely. It is to access, to put something in proximity with something in such a way that it touches but does not touch. The essence of all that is. And the elements on your planet, such as plutonium and uranium, allow for this.
I understand.
You do this within your own hearts by bringing yourself to that place of stillness and neutrality. An immense amount of power can be accessed there.
Yes.
It is not a better state of being, and one cannot stay there and also have a human experience.
Yes, I understand.
While we are on this note, may I share an additional bit of information that may be helpful to you and the collective?
Yes, please.
There is so much emphasis on staying neutral. It's ridiculous. To stay neutral implies such a great amount of polarity. It inherently injects everybody that tries to stay neutral out of anywhere close to the place of neutral.
Makes sense.
And this is one of the great lessons that humanity is currently going through. For over the past few years, there has been an awakening of this access, this capacity for the human form to put it into the words of human mind. There's been this shift for the human mind gaining the understanding that they can essentially touch the essence of what they have often thought of as God, which is that essence of all. It is the central thread. If we are putting it on a graph and drawing it in a geometry, it's the center, it's the zero.
I understand. Thank you
But
for
with
sharing.
that knowledge that people can access and touch that, there has become an obsession with attempting to stay there. It is the obsession with being high vibed. It is the obsession with being neutral. And it is, in doing so, alienating massive aspects of the human experience. It is natural when one discovers that they can access a great power source that they try to go and hug it and stay there, because in contrast it feels better. But what humanity is also learning is that while it feels good to sit by a fire, it is not good to be in the fire.
I understand.
Just because the fire is power.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense.